Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, First of all, it will be difficult to give a lecture just about Professor Reddy because he has immense knowledge in this area, and in fact, the IRC 37, which I'll be discussing, and some of the additional concepts which I have kept. Uh, these guidelines are actually were developed after much research carried out by the IIT Kharagpur team. So definitely, it would have been better if Professor Reddy could have given this lecture to you, but I understand he has already taken it to our lecture in the first half. So let me take this forward. I'll try to I'll try to share the little knowledge which I have in this domain. In fact, most of the concepts which I know, I have in fact learned from uh, Professor Reddy, Professor Pandey, Professor Das, and subsequently after reading a few literatures. Uh, I will, I will definitely be discussing about the contents which are there in IRC 37. I have also kept a small demonstration of the IIT PAVE software. I think Professor Reddy was mentioning that we have to carry out elastic layer analysis. So in India, we typically use IIT PAVE, which is again a result of subsequent research from IIT Kharagpur. So I'll be discussing about, I have kept a small demonstration on it. And in addition to that, few of the additional concepts which I feel is important, at least for the faculty members and for the students who are interested in the area of payment design. So I have kept few of those concepts. I'm not going to read out the entire code for you. I think you can read IRC 37 2018. It is a very well drafted code. I think Professor Reddy was the convener there. And they have done a very fine job in drafting the IRC 37. It's very easy to follow. You'll be able to understand everything, which is. I'm sorry. Am I not audible to you? Can you please confirm?
Sir, you are audible.
Okay. Yeah. So, as I said, that they have the H2 committee of IRC. They have done a great job in drafting the new code in the present form. So, anyone who is interested to know more about the code, you can go through it. It's a very well written code. And as I usually, do, that I dedicate this particular presentation on IRC 37 Professor B.B. Pandey, who produced actually these guidelines for me. And he has done tremendous work in this area. I mean, definitely, it's very difficult to describe the extent of knowledge he had and the contribution he has given in community in few simple words. So will never be able to definitely forget the his contributions in this area. So with this, let us start the presentation. Most of the tables, equations, and values are definitely taken from IRC 37 2018. Uh, I can see that few participants are writing that my voice is not clear. Can you confirm, Bhupendra, once? I am not sure because my mic
Sir,
is.
sir, it's like it's fluctuating a little bit. Other than that, it's fine.
Okay. I mean, the microphone is very near to me. I don't know what is the problem.
So now it's better. Now it's not
Okay. Okay.
fluctuating.
I'll try to be a little more loud. Okay.
Yes.
And some of the photos which I have taken to make this presentation are taken directly from the Google Images. So we'll be discussing about the development of. We start our discussion with the development of IRC 37, a little historical perspective. We will then talk about the payment design, the basic concept of payment design, the layer properties which IRC 37 2018 has different layer properties. We'll be also discussing about stage construction, perpetual payment, and then a small demonstration on IIT Pave. I have also kept some additional concepts at the end of my presentation, but given the time constraint, we will see if I get some time, I will definitely touch upon those topics also. Okay, so if we see the development of IRC 37 in the present form, so the first draft of this code, it came in 1970, and it was subsequently revised in 1984. Now, these two guidelines, they were based on the empirical design method, where CBR of the subgrade was used to find the thickness of different layers in the flexible pavement. In the 70 version, the 1970 version, the traffic was defined in terms of commercial vehicles per day. So I think everyone knows that what is a commercial vehicle, a vehicle with laden weight more than 3 tons. In 1984, though the guideline was empirical in nature, but the traffic was represented in terms of equivalent standard axle load. So equivalent standard axle load is a standard load of 80 kilonewton. We will discuss about equivalent standard axle load probably later in the slides. And then charts were provided up to a design traffic of 30 million standard axle loads. Now in 2001, we shifted to mechanistic empirical design method. And here the response of the pavement. So when I say response of the pavement, it's in terms of stresses, strains, or deflection. It was obtained using the concept of mechanics, the elastic layer theory. And the deterioration or the failure was quantified in terms of performance models. And we had performance models for fatigue crack and for rutting. Now, these performance models are actually developed based on observations in the field. So you can say that this is the empirical part in the mechanistic empirical pavement design. Here, the linear elastic analysis, it was automated using an in-house developed software, which was developed at IIT Kharagpur. It was termed as FPAVE then, which was further renamed as IIT PAVE, the current version we use. This development, it took place as a part of 2 big projects and definitely other projects also. So these projects were R6 and R56, which were sponsored by Ministry of Highways. The traffic level in the 2001, it was extended up to 150 million standard axle load, in contrast to the 30 million standard axle load, which was in the previous documents. In 2012, we incorporated new options for new layers, including cement-treated bases, cement-treated sub-bases. We also had options for emulsion or foam bitumen modified reclaimed asphalt pavement material in the base layers. We also had option for crack relief layers in case CTB, cement-treated bases, are used. Now, this code, it also included provision of combining mixed design attributes in the pavement design. So this was the first time that in the performance model, we had an option that we can combine the mixed design of bituminous mixtures, the parameters of the mixed design, directly with the performance. These performance models for fatigue and rutting were produced for 80% and 90% reliability levels. So we had 2 sets of equations. For example, in fatigue, we had 2 equations, which was for 80% reliability and 90% reliability. And similarly, in the rutting also, we have 2 equations for 80% reliability, 90%. Now, the use of 80% and 90%, when to use, I will tell you later in this. We also had provisions for using different binder grades in the bituminous layers, because earlier only VG30 and VG10 were commonly used for the construction of pavements. But in this particular guideline, we had provisions of using harder grade, especially VG40, when the design traffic is more than 30 million standard axle load. And we also had provision for binders like rubberized rubber modified binder and polymer modified binder. Now, this code was very recently revised based on suggestions which were received earlier. So based on the feedback received on the performance of pavement, more data were collected later on. And then this 2012 version was subsequently revised in the 2018. The code was fine-tuned with supplementary discussion on various aspects of mixed design. So you can see there are various annexures in the current version with more details on the concepts. As I said, it is a very, very well-written code. If you are interested in, you can just buy IRC 37 2018 version and have a read on. Now, when we always say about the mechanistic empirical design, so there is always a confusion why we call it as a mechanistic empirical design. So before I proceed further in these slides, I just want to make this clear that in the mechanistic empirical method, the distresses, what are the distresses? primarily the fatigue cracking and the rutting. These are the primary distress we consider. So distresses are also an indirect indication of the performance. So the performance of the pavement are explained in terms of mechanistic parameters. Okay, so this performance, this occurrence of rutting and occurrence of fatigue cracking, they can be explained in terms of critical mechanistic parameters such as critical stresses, critical strain, or critical deflection. And how do we calculate the stress, strain, or deflection? We use some specific theory. Okay, for example, let us say we are using the linear elastic theory. So we use the linear elastic theory and calculate this critical response, which we believe are related to the performance indicators, are related to the performance or the distresses which we see in the paper. Now, for each distress, a critical mechanistic parameter is identified. For example, if it is a fatigue cracking, we say that tensile strain, horizontal tensile strain at the bottom of bituminous layer is the critical parameter. Similarly, if it is rutting, we say that the vertical compressive strain on the top of subgrade is the critical parameter. So we define first the critical parameter and then we give a specified limit to it. We give a control limit to it. We will say that the epsilon t should not exceed some x value if we want to save the pavement for fatigue cracking. Similarly, epsilon z should not exceed some y value if we want to save the pavement from rutting failure. Now, how do I determine these limiting values? This x and y, how will I determine? These limiting values are obtained through performance model. So there are something called performance model. Now, since we have two primary distresses, we have two performance model. One is for fatigue cracking and the other is for rutting. Okay. Now, how am I actually building this performance model? Now, I have kept some slides at the end of my presentation. If time permits, I will also let you know how these performance models are developed. But what primarily this performance model has, they are developed through data collected in the laboratory and the data collected in the field. Now, since the performance models are more subjectively collected, okay, these incorporates the empirical part in the mechanistic empirical method. Okay, so with this background, let us now proceed. So this is a typical pavement structure. You see, we have embankment, over that we have subgrade, we have subbase, which is extended to the full width of the pavement. Then we have granular base, typically, not always, but typically. And above that, we have prime coat, tack coat, binder course, again a tack coat, and the bituminous course. So how to define pavement design? So pavement design is, in simple terms, can be defined as finding the most suitable layer thicknesses, which means I have to determine the thickness of different layers with some specified or assumed material properties such that the pavement can take the anticipated traffic up to a certain design period before failure. Okay, so this is what I am aiming for in the pavement. Therefore, the pavement has to be designed such that the value of T, what is the value of T? It is the anticipated traffic in terms of equivalent standard excel. Okay. The value of T, it remains always less than the allowable values of NF and R. What is NF and R? These are the allowable values of the equivalent standard excel load for fatigue cracking and for rutting respectively. Okay. So now let us look at the equations, the general form of the equations. So here T, which is the anticipated traffic, is given by this simple formula. Later in the slides, I will tell you how this formula is developed actually. So this is the one which you collect after collecting the traffic data. Okay. So what are the different parameters indicate? This is the predicted traffic. ADT is the average daily traffic at the end of the construction period. So this we will get from traffic survey. Okay. This is the design life. Okay, this is the design life, and R is the rate of increase of traffic. VDF is a very important factor. It is used for converting the data which I collect for different trucks into the repetitions for different types of trucks to the repetition of a standard excel. So that is VDF. I have kept a separate discussion on VDF again towards the end of my presentation. And LDF is the lane distribution factor, because you see, suppose we have a 4-lane, okay, but we are designing the pavement for the wheel path. So definitely all the vehicles, let us say 100 vehicles are coming, all will not ply on exactly on the wheel path. Is not it. There will be some distribution of the vehicles across the lane. So to bring in this distribution, not to make the pavement design too conservative, to bring down the cost, we apply the lane distribution. Okay, so we try indirectly, we try to find out how many vehicles, given we know the lane of the road, the width of the road, how many vehicles will exactly come on the wheel. So this is a distribution parameter for the vehicles which will be moving on the road. Okay. Now this is T. Now what is NF and NR? So NF is a performance model for fatigue. It is typically given by this equation, which you can see here. Okay. Now here NF is the allowable traffic for fatigue criteria. These are the regression coefficients. Okay. So how do we get these regression coefficients? From laboratory data, from field data. Okay. So these are the laboratory coefficients. E is the modulus of the bituminous layer. This is an input. And epsilon T is the tensile strain at the bottom of the bituminous layer. Okay. So, and on what parameters, does epsilon T depends? It will depend on the layer thickness, it will depend on the modulus of the layer, and it will depend on the Poisson's ratio of the layer. So this we get after doing the mechanistic analysis. Okay. Here this factor C is the one which I was saying that in the new code we have a provision of including the mixed design parameters with the performance. Okay. So C is typically given by a formula. C is equal to 10 to the power m. This is for bituminous mix, where m is equal to 4.84 into VBE, which is the volume of the effective binder, divided by volume of air voids, divided by VBE minus 0.6. So this equation actually has been taken from the Asphalt Institute guidelines. So this equation helps us to control or the durability aspects of the binder. So typically the lower bituminous layer, they are made richer in bitumen, okay, because richer in bitumen so that they can take up the tensile strains which are coming due to the repeated traffic. Okay. Now, having said this, now let us see the next parameter, that is NR. So NR is also a performance model equation similar to NF, but this is for rutting. So NR is the allowable traffic corresponding to the rutting. These are again the regression coefficients which are determined or which are estimated based on field observations. And epsilon V is the vertical compressive strain at the top of the sub. Now this vertical compressive strain is a function of the thickness of different layers, modulus of different layers, and the Poisson's ratio. So I hope these aspects are clear to you. So finally, in pavement design, we have to choose appropriate thickness of all the different layers such that the value of T is less than NF and also the value of T is less than NF. So this two criteria has to be satisfied simultaneously. Okay. Now let us jump into the different layers which are there in the, okay, before we jump. So this slide, it indicates those critical locations for different types of pavement. You see, if we have a conventional pavement with granular bases and subbases, then we have two critical locations. One is at the bottom of the bituminous layer. This will control the fatigue cracking. And the other is at the top of the subgrade. This will control the rutting phenomenon. So this is horizontal tensile strain. This is vertical compressive strain. Okay. Now, in this cross section, you see we do not have a conventional cross section. We have cement treated base, let us say. So if there is a cement treated base, then the critical locations will change. I mean, there will be additional critical locations. In this scale, we will have three critical locations. One at the bottom of the bituminous layer. Okay. This will control the fatigue cracking. One again at the top of the subgrade. This will control the rutting. And one at the bottom of the cement treated base. This will control the cracking or the development of fatigue in the cement treated bases, because this is a stabilized layer and with repetition of traffic, this is also bound to crack. Okay, so we have three critical locations: one at the bottom of bituminous layer, at the bottom of CTB, and at the top of the subgrade. Okay, so you can see with change in cross section, also the critical points can change. Okay, and here also typically we put another layer which is known as crack relief layer. This is given so that CTB will crack sometime or the other after the movement of construction traffic, after the movement of actual traffic. So we don't want this crack to propagate to the surface. So in order to stop the reflection cracking, we have to put a cement a crack relief layer between the CTB and the bituminous layer. We will discuss again more about them in the subsequent slides. Okay, let us proceed. So in India, we typically, not in India, in general, we typically have three functional layers above the subgrade. So we have in general three functional layers above the subgrade. So what are these? These are the subbase, base, and the subbase, base, and the bituminous. Okay. The subbase and base, can be granular, okay, or it can also be cemented. These are the options available. Additionally, base layer can also be made up of recycled asphalt pavement inclusive treated with emulsion or foam bitumen. So we can have granular material plus emulsion or foam bitumen. We can have RAB plus emulsion or foam bitumen. We can also have a combination of granular materials and RAB with foam bitumen or emulsion. Okay. So that means in base we have three options: granular, cement treated, and emulsion or foam bitumen treated. In sub-base we have two options: granular, or it can be treated with cementitious material, not cement treated. It should be cementitious material treated, you can say. Okay. Bituminous layer, it comprises of 2 to 3 sublayers. Typically 2 sublayers in India, but it can also be 3 sublayers. The bottom bituminous layer is called as the base course if it is made up of 3 sublayers, or it will be called as a binder course if it is made up of 2 sublayers. And the surface layer is called as the surface course. Okay. And each functional layer can be compacted in one or more layers. Okay, which means suppose we have a thickness of 200 mm of bituminous. So this 200 mm will not be compacted at one. So each layer, this 200 mm, can be compacted in several different layers. Okay, so this layer will be compacted first by the roller, then we will put the next loose thickness and compact it, then the final. So the total will be 200 mm. Now, this lift thickness, we call it as lift thickness. This typically depends on the type of roller we are using, okay, and the nominal maximum aggregate size. For example, the minimum lift thickness should be around 2 to 3 times the nominal maximum aggregate size. We also have provisions somewhere for the maximum lift thickness. It should be restricted to around 6 to 8 inches, or you can say 150 mm to 200 mm, but that also depends on the power of the roller you are using for compacting each layer. Uh, in addition, as I said, if cement treated bases are used, we also have a provision of either a crack relief layer or a stress absorbing member interlayer. Either of the two can be provided if CTP is provided. So these are the option of different layers we have currently in IRC 37 2008. Now let us talk about each layer in. Let us start with subgrade first. So subgrade is the top 500 mm of the foundation. It should be compacted to a minimum of 97% density as evaluated by the modified Proctor test in the lab. We can also compact it to 100% density or even more if possible. So the more is the density, the better it is actually with respect to this. Okay. And why we are actually compacting it to such high density? Because adequate compaction is required for limiting the rutting which will occur in the pavement, and again densification due to the traffic. The resilient modulus, which is an input in the pavement design, is evaluated using a triaxial repeated load test. So ideally a triaxial repeated load test has to be used. Now, since this triaxial repeated load test is complicated and it's costly, okay, the researchers have developed some correlation with the CBR. So we have some equations by which we can indirectly estimate the resilient modulus. So these correlations with CBR exist, and we typically use them for calculation of the resilient modulus. So I will show you that equations, which equations are used for calculating the CBR. But coming to the determination of CBR, how to find the CBR? So CBR has to be determined for the critical condition of the pavement. Okay, so CBR should be determined for the critical condition of the pavement. Now, what are this critical combination and why do we take the critical condition? One can always say, why not compact the CBR at the optimum moisture content? Because we are compacting it at the optimum moisture content in the field, and whatever we get, let us take that for design. But the problem is that though you are constructing the pavement at the OMC, you are compacting the subgrade at the OMC. Once you have constructed it, monsoon will come, there will be changes in the moisture content in the sublayers. Water can penetrate from many sides. Let us say the water table becomes high, it can penetrate. So the moisture content of the subgrade is bound to change with time. Now with change in moisture content, again, the strength of this layer will reduce. So we want to do a more conservative design when we are actually designing the pavement in the first place. Let me give an example. Let us say you are finding the CBR at the OMC, which means at the OMC, optimum moisture content, the density is high, so the CBR will be high. If the CBR will be high, then for the given traffic for which you are designing, the thickness of the layers will be less. Is not it? Because I am trying to resist rutting, and I am saying that, okay, my subgrade is already in a very strong condition, so the thickness of the top layer will be less. But as I said, with time, the moisture content will change. This layer will become weak. So this layer for which you have designed the pavement, they will not be enough to take up the stresses which are coming on the subgrade. Okay. Therefore, we design for a more conservative condition, which means we design for the critical condition of the pavement, which means when the pavement will be in the weakest condition, let us say just after the monsoons. Okay, and for that we will fix the thing so that just after the monsoon we don't have to worry, because we have already designed corresponding to that critical condition. Okay, so so typically what we will do, we will do a 4-day soaking of the, first we will compact it at the OMC, and then we will do it 4-day soaking, and then we will find the CBR. Sometimes if you already have the data from the field, then you can always use the field moisture content also to find out the CBR. Okay, but the compaction has to be done at the optimum moisture content. So these are two important aspects. And definitely, because we will be constructing a long stretch of road, so you have to take soil from different points. So if you are taking from different points, you have to take 90th percentile of the CBR, which means, let us say you have taken 100 samples here. Okay, so out of this 100 samples, the CBR which you will take for design, so 90%, so 90 of these samples should have CBR more than that particular value. Okay, so we take 90th percentile CBR, and if it is a minor road, we will take 80th percentile CBR. That typically we do for low volumes. Okay, now this is the equation which is used for finding out the resilient modulus given we have the CBR. So there are two set of equation. If the CBR is less than or equal to 5%, we use the first equation. If the CBR is more than 5%, we use this equation. Okay. Now you see, sometimes we always ask that if you see the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways guideline, there is already a guideline which says that the density should be 17.5 kilonewtons per meter cube for the sub. Then why do I have to do a CBR testing? So CBR actually is done to get this value of resilient modulus, which is actually used in the pavement design or as a pavement design indicator. Okay. Let us proceed. Now, if the subgrade and the embankment has significantly different values of resilient modulus or values of CBR, we should find the effective resilient modulus. Okay, and how do you find the effective resilient modulus? There is a procedure using the elastic layer analysis which you have to do to find the effective resilient modulus value. So you see, suppose you have an embankment here, and this is a CBR. So there are, if this, suppose let us say subgrade. So let us say the subgrade material is a borrow material which you have brought from someone else, and that has very high value of a CBR. And embankment correspondingly, let us say, has low value of CBR. In that case, we take effective CBR, and that effective CBR I will put in this equation to find out the resilient modulus of the foundation. Okay, and what is the procedure to be used? So what you will do, you will do a two-layer analysis. This layer is infinite, okay, and then you take your subgrade, which is typically 500 mm. You put a single wheel load, 40 kilonewton, because total is 80 kilonewton. 80 kilonewton standard axle. So I take one set here, but I do it on a single wheel. So I take 40 kilonewton. And what I will do, I will find out the deflection here after doing the linear elastic analysis using IITP when the tire pressure is taken as 0.567. Okay, so I will find out the deflection. So find the deflection using IITPF. The second step is, this I have done for the existing case. Then I will take a single layer, semi-infinite in nature, single layer, semi-infinite, and this is E. See, this E1 and E2 I know because for the embankment material I know the CBR, so I can use this equation to calculate the resilient modulus. For the subgrade material I know the CBR, I can use this equation again to find out the resilient modulus. Now I want to find that after combining E1 and E2, what is the equivalent value of? So this E I don't know. This E I am trying to find out. But I know that the deflection at this point, because of this two layer, is equal to delta, okay, which I have evaluated using the IITP analysis. So I will use the Bosenick's equation here. So Bosenick proposed equation for soil materials to find out the value of MRS. So this delta I know, tire pressure I know, radius of tire I know, Poisson's ratio I know. Okay, so I can find out the value of E here. Okay, so this is the way we can find out the effective CBR value if these two layers have some different values of different strengths altogether. It can also happen that the existing embankment is a rocky formation. In that case, and this is a subgrade made up of soil. In that case, if you do the elastic layer analysis using this method, you will get a very high value of effective CBR or effective resilient. So in that case, it is recommended that if there is a rocky foundation, you directly use the resilient modulus of the borrow material. You don't have to do a effective CBR. You don't have to go for the effective modulus method. Okay, and even in the effective modulus method, if the resultant modulus is very high, let us say 200 MPa, we will not use that. So it says this is limited to a maximum of 100 MPa. Okay, so these are the criteria. I hope this is clear to you. Now the next layer is subbase. Okay, so subbase basically has three main properties or three main functions. The first function is to facilitate a strong support for the compaction of the base layer, that is movement of the construction traffic. The second function is to protect the subgrade from overstressing. Okay, and the third function is to act as a drainage or filter. These are the main functions of the subbase. Okay. Now, typically, if the design permits us, then the subbase layer should be compacted in two different layers. So, if this is the subgrade, if this is the subbase, we have to compact it in two different layers. Okay. The top one will be a drainage layer, and the bottom one will be a filter. So, what is the function of drainage layer? It will permit the movement of water from the top of the pavement. What is the function of filter layer? this will stop the movement of fines from the subgrade to the top of the pavement. Okay, so typically it will be constructed in two layers, a filter layer and a drainage layer. Okay, so okay, now for the gradation, what should be the gradation for different filter layers and drainage layers? There are many options available for gradation. So these are the options given by the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, and the IRC suggests that if you are going for drainage layer, you can take G3 and G4. You can clearly see this is more of a uniformly graded, poorly graded material or open graded material. Okay, and if you are targeting for filter layer, you can use G1, G2, G5 or G6. Okay. Now, if the design does not permit, let us say we have to restrict the thickness to less than 200 mm. In that case, we cannot provide two separate layers. We have to provide only one particular layer if the thickness is less than 200 mm for the granular subbase. In that case, a single drainage cum filter layer will be provided. If we are using a single drainage cum filter layer, then we will go for the gradations G5 or G6. Okay. And if you want to know more about the design of these layers, then for the drainage layer you can refer to IRC SP50, and for filter layer you can refer to IRC SP. They will give you more details about the design of these layers. Okay. Sometimes if there is a provision of single layer, okay, drainage cum filter, then we can also provide a geotextile or geogrid as per the specification of IRC SP 15. Okay. Now these geotextile and geogrid, they have many functions actually, but they also primarily serve as drainage as well as filter. So that is also an option. But definitely the details are provided in IRC SP 15. As I said, in addition to the granular layer, another option for the subbase is going for a cement treated subbase. Okay. So if we are going for cement treated subbase, then the recommended gradation is G4 with a minimum thickness of 200 mm. Okay. So the minimum thickness should be 200 mm. Okay. Now for if we talk about determining the minimum thickness of a granular subbase layer, then we have to follow various options or various rules actually. So what is the first rule? The first rule is minimum thickness of any drainage and filter layer individually should be 100 mm. Okay, that is the first rule. What is the second rule? That if you are providing a filter from drainage layer, not separately but in a single layer, then the minimum thickness is 150. This is the second rule. What is the third rule of a minimum thickness? That the minimum thickness should be at least 2.5 times the nominal maximum aggregate size subjected to a minimum of 100 mm. So it should at least be 2.5 times the nominal maximum aggregate size. So this is the third rule. The fourth rule brings in the process of again doing a IDPF analysis. So the minimum thickness is computed for the construction traffic which is going to come. If we do not have the details of the construction traffic, then you can find out the minimum thickness based on 10,000 equivalent standard Excel. Okay, and we have to check the criteria for that. I will quickly tell you how this is done. So what we will do, we will take a two-layer system, subgrade and GSB. So this is GSB, this is subgrade. Okay, and we have the standard Excel load here, 40 kilonewton. Okay, and I will find out because of this 40 kilonewton. Okay, before I do this, what I will do, since I am doing it for 10,000 equivalent standard Excel. So if you remember, the model for Ratic was NR is equal to K1 into 1 by epsilon Z to the power K2. Is not it? So what is this epsilon Z? Vertical compressive strain at the top of the subgrade. This NR, you put NR as 10,000 and you find out the allowable value of epsilon Z allowable. Okay. Now you take in the first iteration, you take some thickness of GSB. Let us say you have taken H1. For this H1 and the standard axle load, you find out the maximum vertical compressive strain at the top of the circuit. That value of epsilon Z should be less than the allowable epsilon Z. If it is not, you increase the thickness to H2. So you do some iteration to find out what is the minimum thickness for which I can satisfy this criteria. Epsilon Z actual is less than epsilon Z allowable. Okay, so that will give you again one thickness. Okay, so you take the maximum of all the values given by these criteria. So this is the way of finding out the minimum thickness. Now coming to the resilient modulus criteria. So the resilient modulus is determined using again an empirical relationship. Okay. What is this empirical relationship? This is the equation. So you can see that m gran, which is the modulus of the granular layer, is equal to 0.2 times into h to the power 0.45 into mr sub. So suppose if this is the surface, granular surface, and this is the subplane. Okay, so suppose we also have an embankment here. So we have evaluated the effective resilient modulus. So we have, this is called as mr support. What is mr support? On which layer this layer is actually resting. Okay, on which layer this layer for which I am trying to find out is actually resting. So this is the foundation. Okay, what is h here? H is the thickness of this layer which we have taken. Okay, and m gran is the value of E or resilient modulus for this layer. So sometimes people ask that, you know, why this equation? Why the resilient modulus of the granular layer should depend on the resilient modulus of the substrate? Now you see these are empirical equation. Now granular layer, they are actually stress dependent layer, which means you change the confining pressure, of this material, the stiffness of this material will change. So to bring in that effect of confining pressure, it was found that this equation is suitable. Okay, so that is why the resilient modulus of the subgrade also comes when we are determining the resilient modulus of the granular layer. Now, one more important thing which I want to point out here, that in calculation, actually, let us say we have a granular base and granular surface. If this is the case and we have a subgrade, in that case, this combined layer is given a single value of modulus. We don't have separate modulus for granular base and granular surface. They are taken as a single layer, and we will take, suppose this is H1 plus H2. So in this particular equation, H is equal to H1 plus H2. Okay, and then the value of E will be equal for both the layers together. So that is the case. But if we have granular layer reinforced with geosynthetic, then what will we do? Then we will use this equation, but in this equation we will apply some correction factors, which is called as modulus improvement factor and layer coefficient ratio. This modulus improvement factor and layer coefficient ratio, the details of this you can find in IRC SP 59. These are basically taken from the ASHTO pavement design. Okay, this modulus improvement factor and layer coefficient ratio. Okay. So let me tell you the process, how it is done. So first we will find the unreinforced modulus using this particular equation. Okay, so suppose we have a geosynthetic reinforced granular surface. Okay? Let us say above this we have granular base. In this case we are not combining both of them. Okay, please remember this. In this case we are not combining. We are taking this separate and this separate. Okay, so now I'm interested to find out the resilient modulus of the subbase. So what I will do? First, I will use this equation. I will use this value of H here, okay, and find out the resilient modulus of unreinforced granular surface. Once I do that, that value of E for granular will be multiplied by these correction factors, if I say it, to get the E of reinforced granular material. So this is what we do. Okay. If it is a CTSB, then how to find out the resilient modulus? So in the CTSB, the elastic modulus is used for design, and the elastic modulus is calculated based on the unconfined compressive strength. Okay. Now for CTSB, for the design of CTSB, you have to remember that the minimum 7-day compressive strength should be in the range of 1.5 to 3 megapascals. Okay. So sometimes people ask how to find out the minimum cement content or the minimum lime fly ash content for designing the CTSB. So you can use this criteria. You keep on increasing the content and you can stop when this minimum criteria is achieved. Okay. And you have to remember that the lab strength should be at least 1.5 times more than the field strength. So you find out the 7-day UCS, satisfy this criteria. This is first thing. Second thing is finding out the resilient modulus or the elastic modulus. We use 1000 into UCS. Now this UCS in this formula is the 28-day UCS, not the 7-day UCS. Okay. So this again we have to do. So typically, if you use this formula, suppose you make some CTSB material in the lab, find out the UCS and use this formula, you will get a very, very high value. Okay, it is not surprising if you get a value of around 2000, 1500. But we take a more conservative value with a reasoning that once the construction has taken place, construction traffic will be moving over it, then actual traffic will be moving over it. Because of change in temperature, because of not actually change in temperature, primarily because of the movement of the traffic, there can be some cracks in the CTSB layer. So the CTSB layer will crack and the strength will reduce even before it is ready for the actual traffic to come. Okay. Therefore, a conservative value of 600 MPa is taken in the design. And for this layer, the Poisson's ratio is taken as 0.25 when we are doing the pavement analysis. Okay. Now, once you have constructed the CTSB layer, then this layer has to be cured for 3 to 7 days before the next layer. Now, this is a very critical practical aspect because many times engineers always complain that this is not actually possible at many locations. They are not able to stop the traffic. In that case, in those cases, it will be very difficult to justify the use of CTSB, especially when we are taking a very high modulus for design. Okay. And please remember here that CTSB and CTB, they are not only cement treated materials. They are cementitious material, which means you can have stabilizers, you can have cement, you can have lime fly ash, and so on. Given that these conditions are set. So they are stabilized waves. So this is one aspect. Okay, moving ahead. Now let us talk about the base layer. So when we talk about the base layer, typically unbound granular or the granular base layers are used. And we have different options in India. I'm sure you must be knowing about them. We have wet mix macadam, we have waterbound macadam, we have crusher macadam. We also have reclaimed concrete, etc. Okay. We can also have, artificial aggregates like blast furnace slag, which is mixed with crushed. So these are the options. The minimum thickness of the unbound granular layer is 150 mm. Okay, or the WMM, let us say the minimum thickness is 150 mm. If we have a granular layer which is placed on CTSB, let us say we have a subgrade CTSB, and above that we have a 150 mm WMM. Let us say WMM. Then presently we do not have any formula to calculate the modulus of this particular layer. So if your WMM is made up of gravelly material, then you take the design the modulus as 300 MPa directly. If it is made up of crushed material, you take it as 350 MPa. Okay. So this is the criteria. If we have geosynthetic reinforced base on granular surface, okay. Let me repeat again. Geosynthetic reinforced base over granular surface, which means we have subgrade. Then we have a GSB, and then we have a CT. In that case, how do I, not CTB, I'm sorry, geosynthetic reinforced base, GRB. Okay. Then how do I find the modulus of this particular? So in that case, we will use this formula. But before using that formula, what you will do, you will find out for the combined GSB and subgrade, what is the equivalent. How you will find out? The similar way we found out the effective value of CBR or the effective value of resilient modulus for subgrade and embankment. So we will combine these two layers, do the IIT PAVE analysis, and find out the equivalent modulus of this particular layer combined. Once we have this modulus value combined, we will put this modulus here, this value of H here, and calculate the unreinforced modulus of the base layer. Once I find the unreinforced modulus of the base layer, this I will multiply with the correction factor using IRCS 59 to get the modulus of the geosynthetic reinforced base. Okay, so I hope this step is also. What if both the layers are reinforced? Okay, so again, what are the steps involved? First, suppose this is the case here. Geosynthetic reinforced subbase, geosynthetic reinforced base. So here first I will find out the modulus of this layer. How do I find out the modulus of this layer? I will use this particular equation. Find out the modulus of unreinforced subbase, multiply with the correction factor, and get the modulus of geosynthetic reinforced subbase. So once I get the value of E here, E1, let us say this is E2. Again, I will do the IIT PAVE analysis, find the equivalent modulus E. This modulus I will put here. Find out the modulus of the unreinforced granular base. Again, multiply the correction factor to find out the modulus of the reinforced granular base. Okay, so I hope these steps are pretty much clear. Okay. Now coming to the cementitious base. So just like subbase, we also have option for cementitious bases. Okay, so there we can use cementitious stabilized aggregates. We can use soil aggregate cementitious material. We can use a combination of lime fly ash and soil or soil. So what are the criteria? So aggregate gradation, to see the aggregate gradation, you can see table 404 of MORTH. This is the gradation we use for CTB. The minimum thickness of CTB is 100 mm. Okay, so what is the criteria for mixed designing CTB? That the minimum 7 or 28-day UCS should be in the range of 4.5 to 7. Now, if it is a cement, okay, if you are using cement, then this criteria should be satisfied in 7 days. But if you are using pozzolanic material, which takes time to develop strength, then the same criteria can be achieved in 28 days also. Okay, and here also the laboratory strength should be 1.5 times more than the field strength. Okay, okay. Now, in addition to this criteria, you see in CTSB, you are deciding the minimum cementitious content only based CTSB, only based on UCS. But in case of the base, cement treated or the cementitious material treated base, the minimum cement content or the cementitious material content should be also decided based on durability. Okay? So you have to carry out a durability test using the specified procedure, and the loss in weight after 12 cycles of wetting and drying or freezing and thawing should be less than 14%. Okay, and then you will fix how much minimum cementitious material is actually required. Okay. For finding out the elastic modulus for pavement analysis, we use the same formula, 1000 into UCS 28 days. Again, in cement treated bases also, if you use the actual UCS value which you get in the lab, you will get a very, very high value, around 10,000 MPa or 15,000 MPa. But for the design, we select a conservative value considering that the CTB will crack because of the movement of the construction traffic. Okay, so we take a design value of 5,000. Okay, again in CTB, it is very important that after construction, at least 7 days of curing is given, which is again a very difficult task, but this has to ensure for proper quality control in the field. Okay, so these are again some of the aspects. In addition to the value of the E, which is used in pavement analysis, we need another value which is again used in pavement analysis, especially when CTB is used. That is the flexural strength. Why is flexural strength required? Because we will have to perform a cumulative fatigue damage analysis. Okay, we have to perform a cumulative fatigue damage analysis for which the modulus of rupture or the flexural strength is required. Okay, so we have some thumb rules actually. The thumb rules are that the modulus of rupture is taken as approximately 20% of the 28-day UCS subjected to a maximum of these values. Okay, subjected to a maximum of these values. Now you see there is also scope if for some BTech project or some small MTech project, though definitely there are available guidelines, but we can also develop some relationship between the indirect tension strength, because you know what happened in the field, we take the core. When you take the core, it is in cylindrical form, is not it? So what test you can very easily do in cylinder? You can do a split tensile strength test, indirect tensile strength test you can do in the lab. Okay, so if I can develop some relationship between the indirect tensile strength and a flexural strength, that will also be very helpful for deciding the appropriate flexural strength while doing the pavement analysis. Okay. Now, in addition to these layers, the granular layer and the cementitious material treated layer, as I said, when CTB is used, we also need to put a crack relief layer. Why is this crack relief layer put in the pavement? It is put when CTB is a part of the construction and we have to stop the reflection cracking from the CTB propagating to the bituminous layer. Okay, so what are the materials? What is the material we will use in the crack relief layer? We will use a dense graded crushed aggregate, WMM typically. Okay, and the minimum thickness is 100 mm. For the crack relief layer, again, we do not have any formula to calculate the value of E for pavement analysis. We will directly use 450 mm. Okay, and you have to remember that crack relief layer should be compacted to 100% of the modified Proctor density. That is why you see a higher value of modulus can be achieved. If someone is not providing crack relief layer, the other option, in case you have a cementitious treated base, you can provide a SAMI layer or a stress absorbing member. So what is a SAMI layer? In SAMI construction, we first spray a elastomeric modified bitumen, okay, at a rate of 10 to 12 kgs per meter square. Then over that, we will put some single sized aggregates, typically 11.2 mm aggregates, and then we will rule it. But this is a very, very thin layer. Since this is a very thin layer, we will not consider the modulus of this layer in the pavement analysis. Okay. Okay. Another option for base layer is you can use a emulsion or foam bitumen treated base, and you can treat the you can do the treatment of the emulsion and foam bitumen either by taking reclaimed asphalt pavement material or the RAP aggregates. You can also use virgin aggregates. You can also use a combination of RAP and virgin aggregates. Okay. So if you are using bitumen emulsion, typically slow setting emulsion is used. I think Professor Kranti already described about the mixed design of emulsified mixes yesterday, or the cold mixtures yesterday. If you are using a foam bitumen, the foaming is done typically with a BG30. Okay. So these are the aspects when you are using this type of layer. Now, what is the modulus to be taken? First, the thickness of this minimum thickness should be 100 mm. For design, again in the lab, you will get a very high modulus around 1500 to 2000 MPa, but typically 800 MPa is used to be on the more conservative side. Okay, and another important, while doing the mixed design, you have to ensure that after water conditioning and in dry condition at 25 degrees Celsius, the minimum ITS, indirect tensile strength, when you do it in a Marshall equipment with 51 mm per minute loading rate, the minimum value should be 100 kPa in the wet condition and 225 kPa in the dry condition. This is also very, very important when you are doing the mixed design. So this check should be made for using this material in the construction. Okay. Now let us move to the final layer, that is the bituminous layers. So as I said, the bituminous layer can be constructed in 2 or 3 layers. If it is a 3 layer, then this is, I'm sorry, if this is a 3 layer, this is called base, this is called binder, and this is called surface course. Typically, if it is a 2 layer construction, then this is called as a binder course, and this is called as a surface course. Okay. So just to inform you that typically in India in the binder course we use DBM mostly for the highways. If it is a low volume road, you can also use BM, bituminous macadam. For the surface course, you have many options. Typically use bituminous concrete. We have also option of SMA to be used, okay, which is a very gap graded mix, highly rut resistant. We also have option for SDBC, but again, this is used only when the traffic is very, and this is a thin layer actually. And if again, if it is a low volume road, we use premix carpet along with the seal coat, so that can also. Okay. So this is the suggestion given by IRC 37/2018 that if the traffic is more than 50 MSA, okay, then for the surface layer you have three options. Either you can use a stone mastic asphalt, you can use a gap graded rubberized binder mix, or you can use a bituminous. If you are using SMA, the code suggests that you always use modified bitumen, but VG40 is also an option. In that case, you will also have to use cellulose fibers to resist the drain down which is occurring in the which may occur in the SMA. Okay. If it is a gap graded rubberized binder mix, then definitely, as the name suggests, has to be a crumb rubber modified bitumen. If it is a bituminous concrete, then you use modified bitumen, okay, not a viscosity graded bitumen, especially for traffic more than 50 million standard axle. If the traffic is 20 to 50 million standard axle, then again for the surface layer you have the same three options, but with some relaxation. What is that relaxation? That relaxation is in the bituminous concrete. That bituminous concrete can be made either with a modified bitumen or you can also use VG40. If the traffic is less than 20 ms, then you have various options for the surface. You can use a bituminous concrete, semi-dense bituminous concrete, pre-mixed carpet, mixed sill surfacing, or surface dressing. But remember that pre-mixed carpet, mixed sill surfacing, surface dressing, they are mostly functional layers and they will not be included when you are doing a pavement analysis. Okay, they will not be included when you are doing a pavement analysis. And the binder which you can use is VG40 or VG30. Here also you remember one thing, that if the thickness is less, okay, if the thickness is less, yeah, if the thickness is less, let us say you have a thickness of less than 40 mm for the surface layer, then it's always good to use VG30 instead of VG40. Why? Because you thin layer, they have a more tendency to deflect. Okay, but since VG40 is a stiffer binder than VG30, then if you use stiffer binder in thin layers and it will deflect, there will be a tendency to crack. Therefore, VG30 is recommended, especially when the thickness is less than 40 mm. Otherwise, VG40 can be used. Okay. Now, coming to the binder course, again for more than 50 MSA, you have only one option, DBM, VG40. For 20 to 50 MSA, you have only one option, DBM with VG40. For less than 20 MSA, you have two options. You can use either a DBM or a bituminous macadam with either VG40 or VG30. Okay. Now, you can see that for the binder course, the code is not recommending the use of modified binders. Now, there can be a question that why we don't use modified binder. So the problem with modified binder is the recyclability. If you are using DBM at the bottom layer, it has been found that there are problems related to recycling of these mixtures, because of which this modified binder is not put in the binder course. These aspects I have already told you. In addition to that, one more important point to remember is if you are doing a construction in a snowbound area, then VG10 should be used. Okay, now coming to the resilient. So ideally, we follow an ASTM code. I'm not able to recall the number of the code now. To find out the resilient modelers by doing a repeated load test in the laboratory. And that resilient modelers should be defined at 35 degrees Celsius. Now you understand, in comparison to the other materials which we use in the pavement, bituminous materials are viscoelastic in nature. So the response of the material to any given loading will be a function of temperature as well as the time of loading. That is why we have to fix a standard temperature at which we are defining the resident modulus for pavement analysis. So in India, considering that the average temperature may be around 35 degrees Celsius, a 35 degrees Celsius value has been recommended. But if you are doing a construction in the snow-bound area where the pavement temperature will never reach 35 degrees Celsius or higher, you can take an average temperature of 20 degrees Celsius to define the resident modulus. Okay, and again, resident modulus is again a complicated parameter in the sense that it depends on many factors. It depends on the aggregate gradation. It depends on the amount of binder, type of binder. It also depends on the volumetric properties of the bitumen structure. Okay, so ideally, you should determine the resident modulus for the mix you are going to use in the construction in the laboratory. And this test is usually a repeated load test with loading and then rest period. So typically 0.1 second of loading and 0.9 second of rest period is given during the test. Okay, and in the analysis, now since we have two layers, bituminous concrete and DBM. Okay, but in the analysis and in the fatigue equation, you will use the properties of DBM. You will use the properties of dense bituminous macadam because this is the place where we are trying to find out the horizontal tensile strain. So when a load is coming, DBM will primarily resist this particular strain. So the properties of DBM are used in the pavement analysis and also in the fatigue model. This table shows the recommended maximum values. Again, these are maximum values. If you are not able to, you do not have the data, then these values can be referred, but still we have to be very precautive while using these values because our experience says that many a times these values are not reached when you are testing the actual material. Okay, so here you will see that for modified bitumen, you see here the value of the resilient modulus is lower than the viscosity graded material. Now again, sometimes people ask that why for modified binder sometimes it's always it is higher too, but many times we also get lower values. People ask that why these lower values are lower values come from modified binders when they are more costly, more stiffer in nature. So in that case, actually, you have to see that resilient modulus is stress by the recoverable strain. Now, since modified binder has a tendency to recover more, the recoverable deformation becomes very, the recoverable strain becomes very high. Okay, and that is why the resilient modulus becomes very low. But that does not mean that these are inferior materials. They are in fact better than the viscosity. Now coming to the construction, DBM can be constructed, as I said, in 1 or 2 layers, depending on whether you are using 3 sub-layers or 2 sub-layers. The code suggests that the bottom DBM should be mixed design for higher or for lower air void content. So when you are doing the mixed design in the lab, the target air void instead of 4% can be taken as 3% if it is a 2-layer construction and 3.5% if it is a single layer construction. So you determine the optimum binder content corresponding to these target areas. So what this will do, this will increase the optimum binder content. If you increase the optimum binder content around the aggregate particles, you will have thicker bituminous film. This will help to resist oxidation. This will help to resist moisture damage and so on. Okay, and they also suggest that they compact it to a lower air. So typically, as I said in my first lecture, that typically 6 to 8% air voids or 92% of the GMM is kept in the construction. But for DBM, it's important that you compact it to 4% when a 2-layer construction is used and 4.5% if a single layer construction is used. Okay, in the field, not after the years. And in that case, usually there is a range of VFB 65 to 75%. But for DBM, since we are going for lower air void and higher optimum binder content, VFB is relaxed to a maximum of 80%. Okay, so these are the aspects about the construction bituminous layer. Now we talk about long life, perpetual pavement sometimes we call it. So what is a long life pavement? It is actually a full depth bituminous construction, you can say. Many times it's not always full depth bituminous, but definitely the thickness of the bituminous layer is very, very high. So how do you design a long life pavement? You do a similar pavement analysis just for a conventional, as you are doing for the conventional pavement, but you have to ensure that you are providing the thicknesses of different layer such that below the bituminous layer you get a maximum horizontal tensile strain of 70 microstrain, and on the top of subgrade, 80 microstrain, and on the top of subgrade you are getting 200 microstrain. So they are called as the endurance limit of the pavement, which means if your pavement has a thickness such that the resulting strain is less than 80 microstrain, that pavement ideally can take infinite number of load repetition. Okay, so but definitely the thickness will be very, very high in that case, and there are various worked out examples which you can see in IRC 37. One is also on the perpetual pavement with different combination options. So you can always optimize the different layers which you are using for design. So the process remains same. Now, if you are doing a construction for the frost susceptible area, then the minimum pavement thickness should be at least 450 mm. This is given so that the capillary action does not take place and your pavement is above the limit where the water will be freezing and the ice will form. Now coming to stage construction, again a very important aspect. So when is stage construction adopted? When, let us say, when first of all, when subsequent maintenance is mandated in the document, which in the tender document, or if the traffic growth is uncertain, we do not know at what rate the traffic is going to grow in the coming years. In that case, we can go for stage construction for economical construction. Okay, but in the stage construction, you have to remember that the base and sub base will be provided for the full design life, which means if the typical design life is 20 years and you are going for a stage construction of, let us say, 10 years, then the base and sub base thickness will be provided for 20 years. Okay, and only the surface layer thickness or the bituminous layer thickness will be provided for the partial period, which is the stage construction period. But here also the thickness will not be decided based on the estimated traffic, because after the end of the stage construction period, what we want that this particular layer has at least 40% of its life remaining. Has at least 40% of its life remaining, which means only 60% deterioration has taken place in this particular layer. Therefore, the anticipated traffic is actually increased to 1.67 times, and then the pavement thickness is calculated. Okay, is calculated. Otherwise, what will happen? If you provide it, for exactly that particular traffic for the 10 years, exactly for that particular traffic, then what will happen at the end of design, at the end of 10 years, this pavement will be in a deteriorated state, or the life of this pavement will be completed. So you might have to go for an entire reconstruction, remove this layer and then layer entire. Now, since you are planning for an overlay here, that is why you have to ensure that this existing layer has at least 40% of its life. And after the end of the stage construction, you have to carry out an FWD analysis. You can follow IRC 105 or IRC 81 to find out how much thickness of the overlay will be required for the remaining 10 years. Okay. And again, in stage construction, one important point to remember is stage construction is not permitted when we are using CTB or CTS. Okay. Otherwise, a lot of cracking will take place in this layer, and the strength will reduce and pavement will fail. Okay. So you can see more examples in the annexures of IRC 37 2018, and these are these slides which I have covered tells mostly everything which is there in IRC 37 with respect to different layers, with respect to the analysis procedures involved and with respect to the provisions of different materials. Now, to understand it, on a more practical level, I will quickly demonstrate. IIT Pave in front of you. So, but I do not think, because after this particular slide, I already have almost 10 to 15 slides more, which I thought of covering from the aspect of pavement analysis. But given the time constraint, I don't think I'll be able to complete those slides. So I will end my presentation just after completing the demonstration of. Okay. So I have taken a very simple example here. I will write down these which you are seeing on the screen, they are the primary equations which we'll be using during the design. Let us say that the design traffic is 4.3 million static pixels. Okay. Once I know the design traffic, now since this is less, I will use 80% reliability. Typically, we use the 90% reliability equation when the design traffic is, I think, more than 20 MSA. Now, since the design traffic is 4.3 MSA only, we will use the 80% reliability equation, which means I will use this equation and this equation. So once I know the design traffic, you can put 4.3 into 10 to the power 6 in the place of NF and in place of NR. And from these two equations, you can find out. And obviously, you will have to know the bituminous mix you use. Let us say that the bituminous mix we are using has a resilient modulus of 2000. Okay, this is what I have assumed. So by taking these values, if I calculate, I have to calculate epsilon t, and from here epsilon. So if you do the calculation, I might be wrong. You can cross check once when you get time, but I did the calculation in a little hurry. So I hope they are correct. So I got epsilon t allowable as 404 into 10 to the power minus 6. So 404 microstreams. And epsilon z or epsilon v allowable I got 810 into 10 to the power minus 6. So this is what I got after doing the calculations. Okay. Now I have to design a pavement layer. Let us say I am using a 3-layer system. This is a granular layer which comprises of base plus subbase. This is the subgrade. Let us say this is the bituminous layer. Okay. It includes DBM plus BC. Let us see. Okay. So now I have to find out the thickness of H1 and thickness of H2 such that the horizontal tensile strain at this position is less than this value, and the vertical compressive strain at this position is less than this value. Okay, so this is an iterative process. Okay, so I have to find H1. Let us say I take 80 mm of bituminous layer and 345 mm of granular. Let us say this is what I have taken. Okay, so and let us say that the CBR of the soil is equal to 4.78%. If I use this particular formula, you see what I will get, the value of E for subgrade is equal to 47.8, 10 into CBR, 47.8. Okay. Similarly, if I use this particular equation, I put H equal to 345 mm, MR support equal to 47.8, I get E of granular layer is equal to 132.58. I think this is the correct calculation. You can always cross check. Okay. And E of bituminous layer I have already assumed as 2000. Let us also assume that the Poisson's ratio for all the layers is 0. Because Poisson's ratio does not have much effect on the pavement analysis, so we are taking 0.35. Okay. So this is the entire thing I am starting. Okay. So I will, please remember this. I am now going to IIT PAVE. This is, are you able to see the screen opening? Can you confirm once?
No, sir, we can still see your presentation only.
Oh, okay. Let me. Uh, not able to see. Okay. Then what I will do, let me unshare the screen and share a new screen. Please remember
Yes.
this. Please remember this input. This will be using in the in this. So stop sharing.
So if you share your whole screen, I think then you can like switch on between.
But I did that actually. Let me try again if you are saying so.
Okay, sir.
Screen, I think that is what I shared. Screen 1, screen is coming. I don't know this screen. Okay, let me share screen 2 once. Are you able to see this?
Sir, your presentation we can see.
Yes, presentation. And now are you able to see something opening up?
No, sir. It's presentation page only.
That's fine. I will do that. What I will do. Okay. Let me.
Sir. Now we can see your whole screen.
Full screen. Okay. Okay. Are you able to see now windows opening? I mean different tabs opening.
Yes, sir. Your folder you have opened.
Now can you see the IIT PAVE opened here in the middle?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So you see, we are designing a new pavement. This is what you get, Transportation Engineering Division, IIT Kharagpur. Design a new pavement section. Okay. So you see the first is number of lanes. So in our case, if I quickly go back, I have removed it. Sorry. So anyways, I think you remember that the number of layers were 3. Elastic modulus of the first layer was 2000 MPa. Poisson's ratio we told we will take as 0.35, and thickness we told that we will take as 80 first. Okay. Elastic modulus of the second layer was 132.58. Poisson's ratio we told we will take as 0.35, and the thickness we took as 345. I think. Right? The last layer, that is subgrade, which is semi-infinite in nature. The value of modulus was 47.8. The Poisson's ratio 0.35. Okay. Now coming to the wheel load. Now you see the wheel load or the standard axle load is 80 kilonewton, which means on one side it will be a 40 kilonewton comprising of 2 wheels. Okay. So one wheel has a load of 20,000. Okay. Tire pressure is standard 0.56 MPa. Let us say we are interested in 2 critical points here, but we will first find out the tensile strain just below the tire and 150 mm at a radial distance from the tire. So I'm taking 4 analysis points. First will be at a depth of 80, 0, just below the bituminous layer. Again 80, 155, because 310 is the spacing between tire to tire. So 155 will be just between the two tires. Okay. Next will be 80 plus 345, which is I think 425, 0, 425, 1. Okay. Wheel set, we have a dual wheel set, so I'm clicking 2. I'm submitting. It says value submitted successfully. I will run it. It says done. And then I will view it here. Are you able to see this? Green screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now you see this is Z. Z means the depth, vertical depth. R is the radial distance. Sigma Z is the stress in the Z direction. Sigma T is the stress in the tangential direction. Sigma R is the stress in the radial direction. Tau is the shear stress in the Z direction. displace this Z. This is the deflection in the Z direction. Okay. Epsilon Z, this is the strain in the Z direction. Epsilon T, strain in the tangential direction, or let us say tangential direction, and epsilon R, strain in the radial direction. Now you see there are even for the single point, you see here there are two values. One is 0, one is L. One is 0, one is L. 0, L. So what is this L? This L basically, okay, forget about this. I will tell you what this L is. Now we are interested to see epsilon T, horizontal tensile strain at the bottom of bituminous layer. Okay, so at the bottom of bituminous layer, we have to see here these two values. You see 465, 315, and also here. So out of these four values, this one and this one, which I am marking now, you see the maximum is 465 microstrain. And if you remember, our limit was 425 microstrain, which means the horizontal tensile strain at the bottom of bituminous layer is exceeding the allowable limit of 425 microstrain, which means that the thicknesses which we have assumed now is incorrect or is not sufficient, and we have to increase the thickness. Okay. Let us also check about the rutting criteria. So rutting was just above the subgrade, so 425. And we are looking at epsilon Z because this is vertical compressive strain, and we will look at the L values. So you see this is 797 microstrain and this is 879. So 879 microstrain is the highest, and our limit was 810 microstrain. Now this is also exceeding the minimum criteria. Okay, which means my pavement is failing here in fatigue as well as in rutting if we are taking the present cross section. So we have to change the thickness. So I will go back to edit. Let us increase the thickness of bituminous layer from 80 to 120 mm. Okay, everything will remain same. Here we will now analyze at 120 mm, 120 mm, and then 120, and then next will be 120 plus 345. So this is 465. Okay, so this is also 465. Again, I will submit. Okay, run. Okay, and now again I will view. Okay, so now you see epsilon. So we have to see these two values. 349 microstrain is the maximum one, and here, okay, this is also less. So 349 microstrain, and you remember our limit was 425. So our pavement is safe in fatigue cracking. Now let us see about rutting. Rutting, we will see the L value. The maximum is 676. You see, and if I compare these two values, 676 microstrain, and my limit is 810 microstrain. Okay, so here also my pavement is safe. So we can always do more iteration. You can also try with 100 mm. You can try with 110 mm, and then you can select an appropriate cross section of the pavement which satisfies the criteria. Okay, so I hope this is clear to you now. Are you able to see the full screen, Bhupendra? Can you confirm once the presentation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So here, I will just add one more point before I conclude. That you see, I showed you that there are few values written with L. Okay? So what is that actually where the pavement is being analyzed? So there is this interface, and there is, let us say, this bituminous layer. This is so this L indicates that without L, one is without L. Without L indicates at this on the bituminous layer. L indicates just below this point. Okay. Similarly, when you see subgrade, without L indicates this point, and with L indicates this point. So for subgrade, we are taking this because we are interested to see the vertical compressive strain in the subgrade. So we take the value with L. Okay. And for horizontal tensile strain, we are interested in the horizontal tensile strain in the bituminous layer. So we take the values without L. Okay. So this is again something with respect to the IIT PAVE which you have to when you are analyzing. Okay. So actually there are various other things to be discussed, but I mean this will take actually 1 more hour. I will not stress upon this. So these are some fundamentals about VDF, how to calculate VDF, how to do calculations of VDF. I mean, someone who has attended my previous lectures in some other platform have gone through these slides. Definitely, I would have been very happy to discuss about them, but again, due to time constraint, I think I'll not be able to cover them in some time. Again, this was something about cumulative fatigue damage, which we use in case of CTB. I also had some examples to demonstrate, which I'll not be able to do now. Then again, I had some slides on how the performance models are actually developed in the lab, looking at the observations from the field. Again, I think I will not be able, but for the performance model, you can refer to this paper by Professor Das and Professor Pandey. Now, this paper will give you a very good idea how these performance models were developed. So just for example, from this paper, I have taken these figures. So you can see this is the fatigue line. This is that performance model. Definitely, it is a modified form now, but this is how it appeared at the initial equation. Okay. Now, when we say that we are using an 80% reliability model and a 90% reliability model, it just means that where we are placing this curve. If I place this curve here, which means all the points are below, which means this is a 100% reliability. If I place a curve here, some points will be top, some points will be bottom. So you have to calculate which reliability level this is. Okay. So in this way, you can actually do the calculations. Similarly, you see more variations were found, especially data scatter was found in the rating curve. But these are the best performance models which we have. So there is again a question that these performance models are pretty old, though in the modified form. We have taken many things from Smart Institute now. But we need more validation in India by doing subsequent data collection from the field, subsequent testings in the lab, because we have so many different options now. We have modified binders, we have crop rubber modified binders. So these models probably will change. And I think IIT Tirupati is doing a project with NHAI on developing new models based on recently collected data. So with this, I end my presentation. Thank you everyone again for being patient.